their lives, but they can't be ignored. They have to, that victim needs to know that it wasn't their fault. That victim needs to know how they can heal from that damage.
Emotional abuse is defined as parents causing or permitting children's mental suffering and not providing normal experiences which produce feelings of being loved, wanted, secure, and worthy. Emotional abuse is often seen in conjunction with other types of abuse and is the most difficult type of abuse to identify. Emotional abuse includes verbal assaults, unpredictable responses or inconsistencies, constant negativity, or exposure to domestic violence.
Emotional abuse is one of the most difficult ones to detect because there are no physical signs. What we're looking for are more behavior changes. So these are things that might need to take place over time. So what we're looking for there is a child who becomes withdrawn, a child who becomes inappropriately attached to a stranger. For instance, if you're newly introduced to a child and that child wants to call you mommy or daddy or wants to hold your hand too much, a child who gets love in their home won't try to form an unnatural attachment with someone who they don't know, like a stranger.
Neglect is negligent treatment or maltreatment of a child by a parent or caretaker. Severe neglect is defined as severe intentional failure to provide adequate foods, clothing, shelter, or medical care, leading to malnutrition and failure to thrive. It also includes purposely placing a child in a situation where harm has or will occur. General neglect is the failure to provide proper food, clothing, shelter, medical care, or supervision where no actual physical injury occurs. General neglect includes lack of medical or dental care, sleep deprivation, inadequate hygiene, inappropriate clothing for the environment, consistent hunger, lack of food, poor supervision for the child's age, and certain behavioral and emotional issues. General neglect is harder to identify than severe neglect.
To me, neglect is when it's just very obvious that there's no attention being paid, that this child is non-existent, at least in the minds of somebody who is that child's caretaker, and that it's not just one day, but that it's obvious that this is just continuous and building to the point that the skin, the hair, the teeth, the clothes, day by day, it's more and more tattered, more and more neglected, and that's bad.
Obviously, recognizing the signs and symptoms of child abuse is of vital importance. However, knowing what is not abuse is important as well. This helps prevent unfounded reports and allows available resources to be focused on genuine cases. Some situations that are not considered abuse are cultural and socioeconomic differences in child-rearing practices, mutual altercations between minors, corporal punishment that is not cruel, inhumane, or traumatic, reasonable and necessary force by police officers or school employees, withholding of treatment for religious reasons after consultation with a physician, unless physical injury or death is imminent, voluntary sex between minors younger than 14, unless there is an age difference of more than 4 years, a positive drug test at birth, or pregnancy of a minor.
I accept responsibility, I think, as a mandated reporter to know what there is to know and to do what I'm supposed to do. And yet at the same time, I have to be mindful of all the different parameters, all the different things that are a part of a child's life. If the child is not eating, maybe this child doesn't want to use the little coupon for free and reduced lunch because that's embarrassing, so the child is not eating every day. And I would notice this child is not eating every day and this child is hungry, that's one thing. Would I conclude from that this child is malnourished, that this child is not being cared for? has been abandoned, that could very well be a leap. And so my responsibility is to have a really good sense of what is and what isn't, and to act appropriately rather than just dive into this being, Inspector Dan trying to make the world right, and perhaps reading much more into the situation than there is.
It is about the health of our community. We need to make sure that our communities are okay. There's a tribe in Africa that when they greet each other, they don't say, "Hi, how are you?" They actually, in translation, is, "How are our children? How are our children doing?"
We all have a moral responsibility to report suspected child abuse, but for some of us there are legal requirements as well. The Child Abuse and Neglect Reporting Act requires certain professionals and laypersons who have a special working relationship or regular contact with children to report known or suspected child abuse to the proper authorities. Many times, such mandated reporters are the first line of defense for the children and families affected by child abuse and neglect.
Anyone who suspects that a child is being neglected or abused should call someone. Whether you're a mandatory reporter or not, you should call someone. Whether it be a friend who maybe knows a little bit more about it, or a law enforcement agency, or even CPS, it should never go without being reported.
There are two types of reporters: mandated reporters and discretionary reporters. Mandated reporters are those required by law to report knowledge and reasonable suspicion of child abuse. Mandated reporters have a legal duty to report and can be held liable for failure to report. If you are a mandated reporter, you have immunity from legal action against you relating to child abuse reporting when on the job or acting in your professional capacity. Discretionary reporters are those who report simply because they develop a concern for a child's welfare, such as neighbors, store owners, relatives, and so on. Discretionary reporters do not have a legal responsibility to report and cannot be held liable for failure to report. But like mandated reporters, discretionary reporters also have immunity from legal actions against them.
It's important that everyone helps out with this process. You don't have to be a mandatory reporter by law to assist law enforcement in helping these children. We encourage anyone in the public. I mean, we have the teachers, the doctors, and other mandatory reporters at the hospitals and things like that, but just average everyday citizens, neighbors, if your children tell you something that they're concerned about for a friend of theirs, you should always listen to them and call the police if you have any kind of suspicion of it.
There are currently 37 categories of mandated reporters under California law, including health practitioners, teachers and teacher aides, child care custodians, employees of child protective agencies, commercial film and photo print processors, clergy, firefighters, animal control and humane society officers, child visitation monitors, in-home support service staff, alcohol and other drug counselors, and court-appointed special advocates. If you are a mandated reporter, your duty to report is not an option. It's the law. The two circumstances under which reporting is required are knowledge of abuse or neglect, actual observation of child abuse or neglect, or information obtained directly from an abused child. Reasonable suspicion of abuse or neglect, concern that a child is being abused or neglected based on facts that could lead to a reasonable person with his or her training and experience to suspect it.
Maybe a child comes in with headaches, and then they come in with nausea. And when you're interacting with the parent and the child, you see that the child is afraid of the parent. And then the child comes in and you're examining their back, say listening to their lungs, and you see a bruise on their back that looks like a fist print or a slap or a belt buckle. Those are more obvious signs, but if it is more subtle than that, so a bruise where maybe there shouldn't be a bruise on, say, a 5-year-old.
And this